I said to the old man the other day, it was in the afternoon and it was hot. And I said, man, it's 2:00. I said, we'd be rolling out for the second practice right now. It didn't matter if it was 100 and whatever, we were rolling out for the second practice. You know what I've learned, though? You can't make kids tough. They got to be tough when you get them, and then you can make them tougher. I learned that. I don't know how many times that old man said to me, he said, we'll find out how tough they are when you put them in the middle of that ring. You can't do it anymore. I'm gonna tell you, I was telling my brother's in town. I'm home tonight. We talk all the time about how things were, and I'm gonna go over there tomorrow and visit, and we'll talk for hours. Kids are different than they were 25 years ago, without question. But more important than that is coaching's different. He went to state, and after a couple years left state and was drafted. He'd just gotten married, and they sent him to Korea right after the war. My brother was born while he was in Korea, but then came back and went back to state to graduate. I think that said a lot, because he could have come back and just or stayed in the military or gone to work, but he wanted to go back and finish that education that he started, and played football again. He played football 2 separate times at state. It was after the war. It was just the fact of being a newlywed and a father, and he's gone real quick. I wasn't around. I wasn't born yet. He got married in 53 and was gone shortly thereafter. And then my brother was born in 54 while he was gone to Korea. I guess he was in Korea a year or so. You knew that if you messed up, there was going to be hell to pay. My brother was 5 years older than I was, but we still were together a lot and fought and argued. And if the old man wasn't home when we did, then he came home, and my mother hadn't handled it, then he handled it. And it wasn't, just like when we all played for him, it wasn't pleasant. It was loud, and you knew you'd screwed up. Oh man! I mean, it was very similar to playing for him. Wasn't much different. Growing up around football, I remember going to practice when the earliest memories are going to football practice. Being out there, riding the bus, and being around him in that area. That was the most fun. You remember those things more than anything. It stays with you. I think the most important legacy is whether you're, a teacher, a coach, or a father, is that you've taken care of those that or your children, or those that were in your class, or those that played for you. You see somebody at the store, and they have a fond memory when they see you, and they're grateful that they had you in the classroom or on the practice field, or your kids are grateful. Mine are in school. I pretty much talk to both of them every day still. They're 23 and 20 years old, and that's a good feeling that your kids still want to talk to you. They don't go days or weeks at a time where they don't have a whole lot to do with their parents. The same thing, that was what was cool about going back to Bird in 2015 was being in a situation where guys like Earl and all kinds of guys were able to know where you were and to come see you. And that kind of says it all right there. If someone's willing to come back, then obviously what it was that we did meant something. And I think that's his legacy, and those of us who either grew up in his house or grew up in his weight room or his practice field feel the same way. That's what we want as our legacy. Family was it. By family too, you mean football. His coaching staffs and his kids, whether it was us, and then of course my mother was a great coach's wife. She never deprived him of anything. There's some wives out there that don't want their husbands there all summer or all winter or even in the fall, but she was a great coach's wife. So the family, and to include everything that was with football, the kids and the coaches. Once he had his boys, whether it was you guys or his coaches, then he was happy. He loved it. He loved practice. He loved for 55 years. Obviously he loved everything about it. If there was a more fierce competitor, I don't know who it was. I really don't. He wanted to win and kick somebody's Friday night more than anybody. But at the same time, he always used to say, if you take care of the kids, then they'll take care of those Friday nights. People who weren't committed to what it is they were doing. A kid who didn't want to come to class and do what he was supposed to do, or who didn't want to just sit there in class and be appreciative of someone who was there trying to help them. Same thing with a football kid. Kid who didn't want to commit to the program or commit to the work ethic. Didn't want to buy in. Get rid of them. Give them a chance. Try to reach them. Tell them you love them. But then if that doesn't reel him in, then he's the first one to get rid of somebody, whether it was in class or in practice. I saw a kid when I was a kid, before I even played with him, the kid wasn't hitting the sled like he was supposed to. He ran him off the field. He was done. In my first practice as an assistant coach in '83, we had a kid who was a great athlete. He was 45 minutes late for practice. And he fired him. Those were the rules. He did mellow out in a lot of ways, and as times changed, he changed some too. If you couldn't make that commitment, then you might as well find somewhere else to go. Tough old Italian. Bob was the youngest in the family. He had to grow up in tough times, during the Depression. But the real influence was my grandmother. She was, oh yeah, she ran the family. She ran it. She was a, big Italian woman, and she was the boss. She was mama. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, they both came over on the boat. She was the boss. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She ran the family, and in a lot of ways, my mother ran the family too. As dominant and as powerful a person as Bob was, my mother still ran the house in a lot of ways. She was a great coach's wife, but she also was the boss at home, just like my wife is. The other one was my sister, who was a part of our football family. She went to Byrd and then came back and taught at Byrd. And, my father had the two boys, but he also had my sister as well as my mother, and their support was always so very important. And then my wife came along, and her support was there too. We left Byrd after the '04 season, but those kids on that team still were Byrd kids. We just didn't have but 21 of them. And couldn't win. We won 5 games. We still got in the playoffs, but we just couldn't win like we had won. And then to come back 10 years later, the difference in those kids was night and day. Instead of having the majority of the team that were Byrd kids, you had only a couple that could have played with you guys. And so in our conversations, you just wonder what happened. What happened to kids? What happened to that community? And those were things we talked about all the time. What do we do? I mean, and he had an old saying, I'm not a heart surgeon. We're not heart surgeons. I think the world changed, and he couldn't see it. Or he couldn't understand, what had happened. For his benefit by then, it was more my problem than his. That was the fortunate thing for him. Our last season at 71st was not good, but those same kids and didn't win a game when they were sophomores. But 2 years later, when they were seniors, they went 12-1. And then that was the thing we kept talking about to those kids at Bird. It took a lot of guts on Bob's part to play all those young kids and take all those lumps. But those kids stayed together and rallied and made amends by the time they were seniors. They won 5 or 6 their junior years, and then their senior years they went undefeated until they got beat in the playoffs. But we could never get that done at Bird. We just didn't have those kind of that kind of character, that kind of commitment out of those people. I think a lot of it has to do with him. You know, that's the one thing I learned. The missing thing was him. You know, he had himself, who was the ultimate, you know, disciplinarian, and the ultimate. When he went off, everybody went for cover. By the time I became head coach, it was kind of a joint effort there in those last years at Bird, or all the good years at Bird, and then at 71st. But by the time my turn came as a head coach, he had taken on a different role. Those were things we were missing, but at the same time, if either one of us had been like we were in 1997, we wouldn't have had 5 kids left playing football. I don't know who he said it to, but the old man used to talk about, somebody came out there to practice with us, and Antonio Dyson told him, "Man, if you ain't tough, you don't need to be out here." Had to be a street fighter. He probably is the best blocker any of us have ever seen. That's saying a lot. Hands down. When he made his mind up to reach or come down, it was, oh gosh. Last time I looked, Nick Saban was in the weight room wanting him to go to Michigan State. We reached a point in 2012 where, and that was the year, that was our last year at 71st, and we didn't win a game, but that was those kids that in 14 for Duran would win, 12, but the county was doing some things that we weren't happy about. He was very upset about. We decided in early in the season that it would be our last season there. But even when it ended, he had second thoughts about it being over. He was 80 years old. He was 81. He was 81 years old. He was still a head coach and would have kept going. I kind of just said, no, well, it's time to not do it this way anymore. So it was something that was his life, and he never wanted to quit doing it at Bird, and then in 15, we both went back over there to help Scott. Scott was very gracious and wanted the old man around and wanted him out there, and it was a good thing. So it gave him 5 more years of being around it, and 5 more years to be at Bird. There were some others before me
that were important in his life. But the main three that did it the longest with the two of us involved was Mike Shea, Bloom, and then Dave Watson, who we got at 71st, and then he went to Bird for 1 year with Russell Stone, and then he was there when we went back in 15, and he stayed. He's still at Bird, but he's out of football. Two qualities. One was commitment. You know, were they going to commit to the summers? Were they going to commit to the hours of the season? And were they going to commit to the off season? Sometimes they had other sports, but that was probably the only thing that was going to keep them from being there in the off season, from every day in the weight room like we did. The other quality was loyalty. He always used to say he didn't need an assistant coach going out on Saturday mornings talking about what we should have done if things had not gone well on that Friday night. Football knowledge and any of those other qualities were important, but nothing more important than the commitment they were making to the program, to him, and then the loyalty that they would show the program and him also. Very important. So many others. Coach McFadder, J.J. Jones, Kyle Dunn. We had a young man that played for us at 71st and came over to Bird with us, Jalen Washington. Jacoby Watkins had played at Carolina, and then he came to us at 71st, and we remained close. There's a long list of guys who have done it, and I know I've left somebody out. But Coach Bloom, Coach Shea, Coach Watson, those were with us for more than one stop. In our last few years at Bird, after 2000, before we left in 05, we were able to hire. We got to the point where the only guys we were really thinking about hiring, who he really felt comfortable with, were former players. And that's when we hired James Colombo, we hired Scotty Barber, we hired Brian Randolph. And before that, James Scruggs had been with us, who had played for us in the late 80s. Dylan Cattell, who you played with, coached with us. Bobby Stanley. Rick Stoker and Jeff Nance. Jeff was with us through the great years of the 90s. Rick started with us in the 80s and went all the way till Bird opened in 2000, and then was there my first year at Bird in 83, Coach Rick Stoker, who stayed with us through the 90s to 2000. And their loyalty and commitment was unquestioned, just like the other guys that we've talked about. We talked about coaches being loyal and coaches being committed, and we talked about coaches coaching other sports, but they were still committed to football. We were blessed. We had John Kistler, who helped us in so many ways, and Son Kicked With You, and the list was so long, and there were just so many good people that made our jobs that much more fun and was also so beneficial to the kids who played. The one thing that I've always told people was that you need three things to be successful. You need the kids, which we had, you need the coaching staffs, which we had, and you need the administration that we had. And we were fortunate with people like Coach George Ellis, Mr. Buddy Brown, and then Mick Stoker at 71st. Those guys made it possible to do a lot of the things that we were able to do.
We all know that that's the ultimate team game. It's the ultimate American game. There's no other sport that requires people to work together and make commitments and work year-round to be successful at. And nobody else can play it but us. In 1982, Bird played 71st at home. I wasn't coaching. I was senior in college. It came down to a fourth down play. This time, it was, instead of them running at us like they did in 97, they threw it. Our safety made a great play in the end zone, knocked the ball away, and Bird beat 71st. Close. I don't know if it was 3 or what it was, but it was a close game. And one of the players was a junior defensive end named Ricky Shaw, who would go on to play at Oklahoma State and then play for the Giants and the Eagles. He played for Parcells and for the Giants. He was throwing the discus that spring of 83 or 84. This might have been his senior year, but it came down to the last throw, and he was behind. It was a big meet, a regional meet. And his last throw, he won the meet. I guess the old man asked him, Rick, how'd you do that? And he said, Coach, it's fourth down against 71st. And that's football. I mean, that's something you live every day. It's fourth down against 71st. Devotionals. Some of them were every year devotionals. David and Goliath, when we had a game that looked like, we were the underdogs. When there was a big one to win, we're going to get out of the boat. He always used to tell people that teaching and coaching was a calling, just like being a preacher was. You were called into a religious life or you were called into a life as a teacher and a coach just like you were called into a religious life, because you were going to have some of the same effects on people that a preacher has. So did he look at himself as a preacher? No, but I think over time he saw an opportunity, because when I played and then into the 80s, he didn't give a devotional. I think that came later, maybe almost into the 90s. But I think he saw an opportunity, especially on a Friday night where you had 100% of their attention. He saw an opportunity to get a message that would also relate to life, but in some cases, and more importantly, some nights, it would really relate into what you had to do at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. As time went by, a lot of the devotionals, we would talk about, what we were going to do offensively and defensively through the week. And then as it got closer and closer to Friday, we would also talk about what's a good devotional this week. What do they need to hear? So it became, especially when he was doing them for me the last 5 years or last 4 years. Then he really leaned more on me to say, hey, what do they need to hear? But even back when you were playing, there would be weeks when he may have asked, hey, what do you think's good this week? But I'd say when you were playing, 99% of those were his gut as to who we were playing and what was going on. Where he had one he used to give where it talked about the importance of everybody on the team, the body. No one part of the body is more important than another part of the body. And if he ever felt like there were some selfish issues going on, or if there were prima donna issues going on, or if he felt like he had to the scout dudes had done a great job that week and beating the heck out of the offensive linemen or giving us a great look. He wanted to make sure those kids understood that they were just as important as Willie or Marcus or CJ. He had a knack for knowing what you guys needed to hear. He could deliver it. It fell on a lot of good ears. The very last game that I coached at Bird in November of 19, we had to go to Fairmont. I got to where I would get them all dressed, and then the hut was down by the baseball field. And they were, and I always asked him after the devotional, was everything okay? He gave devotionals to the St. Paul's kids. When I went down there for 2 years, he used to come on Friday nights and give them theirs, and then he gave them with Scott. The very last night, I came down to the hut. We used to leave from the baseball field, from the parking lot down there. We'd have the buses waiting down there, and we'd go from there by then. November of 19. That was the last one he did. There's no better person to have been a father and to played for him and coached with him for my whole life. He always wanted all of us to go to the next level and get us ready for whatever it was, and he made me a better man and a better husband and a better father because I was his son and I was his player and I was his coach. I got to be all three. That's pretty cool. Like I said earlier, Earl, the more I did it, the longer I did it, and especially going back to Bird, which we had to do, it made us appreciate more you guys who were hard rocks and who just needed a little bit of go where that guy goes. That's easy to say. I don't know what context I used it in the other day. We were talking and I said, it's just like you telling the power back to go in B gap. I said, the power back goes in B gap and the fullback kicks out. He said, yep. And we double, and he said, and we double down with the tight end and the tackle. I said, yeah, there you go. You know, and run off tackle. Those things you can do with tough guys like Earl. Coaching you guys was always a challenge, but it wasn't impossible. We still won. It was the right time, man. I don't know how many times that old man said to me, he said, we'll find out how tough they are. Put them in the middle of that ring. You can't do it anymore. Coaching's different. Had to be a street fighter.